Most people think they understand fat loss, but they are actually missing the most important part of it. You have probably heard the advice 100 times: eat less, move more, and the fat will disappear. That advice is not completely wrong, but it leaves out something so critical that it changes everything you believe. Have you ever stopped and genuinely asked yourself where body fat actually goes when you start losing it? Does it melt away into nothing? Does it sweat out through your skin? Or does something else entirely happen? The answer is something most people have never been told, and once you hear it, everything will change. Because understanding how fat actually leaves your body is not just interesting, it is the key to real progress. Most people spend months exercising hard, tracking every calorie, and sweating through brutal workouts without seeing the results they want. They are working incredibly hard, but they are missing a biological truth that makes all the difference in the world. Today, you are going to follow the complete journey of body fat from the moment it is stored inside you. You will trace it through your bloodstream, into your cells, and discover exactly where and how it gets burned forever. And along the way, you will uncover why one of the most popular fitness beliefs is only partially true. But before we talk about burning fat, we need to understand what body fat actually is at a deeper level. Most people think of body fat as one single thing, a stubborn layer sitting on the body causing problems. But the reality is far more fascinating, and understanding it will completely shift the way you approach fat loss. There are actually two very different types of fat stored inside your body, and they do not behave the same. The first type sits just beneath the surface of your skin and is called subcutaneous fat by scientists and doctors. This is the fat you can physically pinch around your waist, your arms, your thighs, and your hips right now. It is also the fat responsible for hiding muscle definition and making it harder to see the shape underneath. But deeper inside your body, hidden from view, lives another type of fat that most people never think about. This second type is called visceral fat, and unlike subcutaneous fat, it wraps around your internal organs deep inside. It surrounds structures like your liver, your intestines, and other critical organs, sitting deep within your abdominal cavity. While both types store energy for the body, visceral fat is the one that researchers pay the most attention to. Excessive visceral fat has been strongly linked to serious health problems, including insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes in adults. It is also connected to cardiovascular disease and chronic inflammation, which means where fat is stored truly matters enormously. So the question is no longer just how much fat you carry, it's also about where your body stores it. But regardless of its location, all body fat shares one thing in common that you absolutely need to understand now. All body fat is stored inside specialized cells called fat cells, which act like tiny biological storage units throughout your body. Their entire job is to hold on to energy and keep it safely locked away for whenever your body might need it. Over time, these storage units fill up and become surprisingly large, which raises a question that most people never ask. When people lose body fat, what actually happens to those fat cells? Do they disappear, die, or something else entirely? This is where the real story begins, and the answer is something that almost nobody in the fitness world discusses. The fat cell does not just disappear when you lose fat. Instead, something far more interesting happens deep inside it. Most people imagine fat loss begins the moment they start running, jumping, cycling, or pushing through an intense workout session.
But surprisingly, none of those activities are actually the true starting point of where fat loss begins in your body. The real beginning happens somewhere completely invisible, deep inside a single microscopic fat cell you cannot see or feel. Remember those tiny storage units we just talked about? Each one is packed with stored energy molecules called triglycerides inside. Think of a triglyceride as a tightly bundled package of fuel that your body has carefully saved for a later moment. As long as that fuel stays locked inside the fat cell, absolutely nothing changes, and the fat stays exactly where it is. For fat loss to actually begin, your body must first send signals to unlock and release those stored energy reserves inside. This unlocking process has a name, and that name is lipolysis, one of the most important words in all of fat loss. Despite sounding complicated, the concept behind lipolysis is actually beautifully simple once you break the word down into its two parts. Lipo means fat, and lysis means breakdown, so lipolysis literally just means the process of breaking your stored fat apart. When your body needs more energy than it currently has available, it sends chemical signals directly to the waiting fat cells. In response to those signals, the triglycerides packed inside the fat cells begin to break apart into smaller, separate pieces. One triglyceride molecule splits into glycerol and 3 individual fatty acids, and for the first time, the stored energy is free. Those newly released fatty acids exit the fat cell and enter your bloodstream, ready to travel wherever the body needs them. As this process continues over time, the fat cell gradually shrinks, not because it dies, but because it is emptying out. This shrinking of the fat cell is the very first true step of fat loss, and it is happening inside you. But here is something critical that most people never realize, and missing this point leads to enormous confusion about fat loss. Just because fat has been released from a fat cell does not mean that fat has actually been burned yet. Releasing fat and burning fat are two completely separate events, and understanding the difference between them is absolutely essential right now. Once those fatty acids enter the bloodstream, their journey has only just begun, and the outcome is still not guaranteed at all. You might think the hard part is over the moment fat leaves the cell and enters your bloodstream, flowing freely, but this is actually where fat loss becomes much more interesting, because the bloodstream is simply a transportation network, nothing more. Think of your bloodstream as a massive highway system designed to move nutrients, hormones, oxygen, and fatty acids all around your body. Being released into the bloodstream does not guarantee those fatty acids will be used. It only means they are now available. And that distinction between being available and actually being used is one of the most important ideas in all of fitness. Imagine walking to your bank, withdrawing all your savings, and holding the cash in your hand without actually spending any of it. The money is no longer locked away, but until you spend it somewhere, it hasn't really done anything meaningful yet. Fatty acids inside your bloodstream behave in almost exactly the same way as that cash sitting in your hand unused. Once circulating in your blood, those fatty acids need to be taken up by cells that are actively demanding energy right now. Muscle cells, heart cells, and various tissues throughout your body can absorb these fatty acids when they need additional fuel urgently. But if your body does not actually require that energy at the moment, those fatty acids do not simply vanish into nothing. Instead, they can be repackaged and sent right back into storage inside fat cells, completely undoing the progress that lipolysis started.
This means released fat is absolutely not the same thing as lost fat, and that difference matters more than most people realize. Many people focus entirely on releasing fat from fat cells through exercise, but very few ever ask the next logical question. The next question is this: where do those fatty acids actually need to go for the fat to truly be burned? Because for body fat to genuinely disappear forever, those fatty acids must reach a very specific and remarkable structure inside your cells. This structure is so small that thousands of them fit inside a single cell, yet without it, fat burning is impossible. And the moment you understand what this structure does, your entire understanding of fat loss will shift in a powerful new direction. The structure we are talking about is called the mitochondria, often described as the powerhouse of every cell in your body. Mitochondria are tiny but extraordinary structures found throughout your entire body, working constantly to keep every single cell alive and energized. They are especially abundant in tissues that demand the most energy, including your muscles, your heart, and your constantly working brain.
Their primary job is elegantly simple: take available fuel, convert it into usable energy, and power every function your body performs. Now, remember those fatty acids that were released from fat cells and have been traveling through your bloodstream looking for purpose. Eventually, some of those fatty acids arrive at cells that are actively demanding energy, and they enter those cells immediately. Once inside the cell, the fatty acids are transported directly into the mitochondria, and this is where everything truly changes forever. Inside the mitochondria, those fatty acids undergo a remarkable process called beta oxidation, which is the actual moment fat gets burned. You do not need to memorize that term, but you absolutely need to understand what it accomplishes inside your body right now. Beta oxidation breaks fatty acids down into smaller, usable pieces that the mitochondria then convert into enormous amounts of usable energy. Fat actually contains a stunning amount of stored energy, far more than carbohydrates on a molecule-for-molecule comparison basis. This explains why the human body can store enough fat energy to fuel itself for days or even weeks under the right conditions. But here's the critical catch that changes how you think about exercise, workouts, and fat loss in a permanent way. This entire fat-burning process inside the mitochondria depends completely on one absolutely essential ingredient that cannot be replaced by anything else. That ingredient is oxygen. Without a continuous supply of oxygen, fat cannot be fully broken down for energy inside you. And that single biological fact explains one of the biggest and most persistent misunderstandings in the entire history of the fitness world. Your body has multiple different systems for producing energy, but only one of those systems can actually use fat as fuel. This is why not every form of exercise burns fat equally, and understanding the three energy systems will completely change your training. Your body does not rely on a single energy system. It actually has three, each designed for completely different situations entirely. The first system is called the phosphocreatine system, and you can think of it as your body's emergency instant power source. It activates incredibly fast and delivers explosive energy immediately, but it burns through its limited fuel supply in roughly 5 to 10 seconds. This system powers your most explosive movements, a maximum sprint, a heavy barbell lift, or a powerful explosive jump upward. Once those 10 seconds are up, this system is essentially empty, and your body must switch to something else for energy. The second system is called anaerobic glycolysis, and it takes over during hard efforts lasting anywhere from 10 seconds to 2 minutes.
Think of intense cycling sprints, repeated high-effort intervals, or any activity that pushes you to breathe very hard very quickly. This system is faster than the third one, but it comes with a serious cost as fatigue builds up rapidly inside muscles. And just like the first system, anaerobic glycolysis cannot burn fat. It runs almost entirely on carbohydrates stored in your muscles. Now we arrive at the third and most important system for fat loss, the aerobic energy system powering everything longer lasting. This is the system that powers walking, jogging, swimming, cycling at a moderate pace, and even sitting completely still right now. Unlike the other two systems, the aerobic system uses oxygen to generate energy, and that changes everything about how it works. Because it uses oxygen, it can access the mitochondria, and because it accesses the mitochondria, it can actually burn stored fat. This is the only energy system your body possesses that is capable of burning body fat as a primary fuel source. Suddenly, a lot of popular fitness advice starts making perfect sense, but it also creates a fascinating and important new mystery. If the aerobic system is the only one that burns fat, does that mean slow, steady cardio is always the best choice? The answer is where things get truly interesting, because this is exactly where the famous fat-burning zone enters the conversation now. You have probably seen the fat-burning zone displayed on treadmills, ellipticals, or cycling machines at your local gym before. The concept sounds perfectly logical. At lower to moderate exercise intensities, your body burns a higher percentage of fat for energy. As intensity increases, your body starts relying more heavily on carbohydrates because they can deliver energy much faster than fat can. And physiologically speaking, this is completely true. There really is an intensity level where fat oxidation reaches its absolute peak. For most people, this peak fat-burning intensity occurs around what is commonly called Zone 2 training in the fitness world. Zone 2 is a pace where you are breathing noticeably harder than normal, but can still hold a short conversation comfortably. At this intensity, your mitochondria are working with maximum efficiency, oxygen delivery is strong, and fat is your dominant fuel source. So far, this all sounds perfect. Exercise in Zone 2, burn maximum fat, and the body fat melts away forever. But here is where the critical mistake happens, and it is a mistake that confuses millions of people working hard every day. People hear the phrase fat-burning zone and instantly assume it must also be the best zone for overall fat loss. Those two things sound identical on the surface, but they are actually completely different ideas that lead to very different outcomes entirely. Zone 2 may maximize the percentage of fat burned during the workout itself, but that is only one piece of the puzzle. It does not necessarily maximize the total amount of fat your body loses across the entire 24-hour day ahead. And once you understand what happens to your body after the workout ends, this distinction becomes one of the most important insights ever. Because some forms of exercise that burn a lower percentage of fat during the session can still produce greater overall fat loss. That sounds completely backwards and almost impossible, but once you understand what happens after exercise ends, it makes complete and perfect sense. This is where fat loss starts becoming genuinely counterintuitive and where most fitness conversations completely miss the bigger picture entirely. If Zone 2 burns a higher percentage of fat during exercise, then high-intensity training should logically be worse for fat loss. That is what logic seems to suggest, but when researchers began studying the full picture, they discovered something absolutely fascinating and unexpected.
Your body does not stop using energy the moment your workout ends and you sit down to recover and rest. In fact, certain workouts continue influencing how much energy your body uses for many hours after you have finished exercising completely. Consider two people. One performs a steady, moderate Zone 2 workout, burning a high percentage of fat throughout the entire session. Now consider the second person performing a much harder and more intense workout, where the body relies heavily on carbohydrates for fuel. During the workout itself, the second person appears to be burning less fat, and based on percentages alone, that is technically true. But here is the critical detail that changes the entire outcome and makes high-intensity training so valuable for fat loss overall. That harder workout typically burns significantly more total energy overall, both during the session and in the critical hours that follow after. When the intense workout finishes, the body still has an enormous amount of recovery work left to do before returning to baseline. Heart rate remains elevated, breathing gradually slows, damaged muscle tissue begins repairing itself, and depleted energy stores need to be fully replenished. All of these recovery processes demand energy, and your body draws on available fuel sources to complete every single one of them. This phenomenon is called excess post-exercise oxygen consumption, commonly known as EPOC, and it is a powerful driver of overall fat loss. You can think of EPOC as the body's recovery bill. The harder the workout, the larger and longer that recovery bill becomes. Suddenly, the conversation is no longer about what percentage of fat was burned during the 45 minutes of your actual workout. It becomes about how much total energy your body uses across the entire day, from morning through the night while you sleep. This is why the most successful fat loss programs include more than just steady-state cardio performed at a comfortable, moderate pace. Zone 2 training is incredibly powerful, but it is only one tool in what should be a much more complete and balanced approach. Which brings us to the most practical and important question of everything we have covered together throughout this entire journey so far. If both low-intensity and high-intensity exercise each offer unique and powerful advantages, what should an ideal fat loss plan include? By now you can see clearly why so many fitness debates become confusing and why people online argue endlessly about the best approach.
One person swears by Zone 2, another lives by HIIT, and someone else insists resistance training is the only real answer. And the truth that most people never want to accept is that all three of those people are actually partly correct. Each type of exercise solves a completely different piece of the fat loss puzzle, and you genuinely need all three working together. Zone 2 training is extraordinary at improving your aerobic system and making your body dramatically more efficient at using oxygen over time. It improves mitochondrial function, builds your cardiovascular base, and allows you to accumulate large amounts of activity without generating excessive fatigue. High-intensity training creates a powerful metabolic demand, burns significant total energy quickly, and generates the EPOC effect that extends calorie burning. And then there's resistance training, arguably the single most overlooked and undervalued piece of the entire fat loss equation today. Here's something that genuinely surprises most people when they first hear it stated this clearly and directly without any softening. Losing weight and losing fat are not the same thing, and confusing the two leads to some very disappointing long-term outcomes. If your only goal is to see a smaller number on the scale, almost any consistent calorie deficit will eventually get you there.
But if your goal is to lose body fat while preserving the muscle underneath, resistance training becomes absolutely non-negotiable in your program. Resistance training sends your body a critical signal, a signal that says, this muscle is being used, so keep it alive. Without that signal being sent regularly, your body may lose just as much muscle as fat during a prolonged calorie deficit period. And losing muscle makes future fat loss harder, slows your metabolism, and leaves you looking and feeling far worse than you expected. This is exactly why the most effective and sustainable fat loss plan is never built around a single type of exercise alone. It is built around intelligent balance, resistance training sessions each week, regular aerobic activity, and occasional high-intensity efforts when appropriate. When you combine these three approaches, you are no longer relying on a single tool while ignoring everything else available to you. You are using every major energy system, protecting your muscle mass, and creating the metabolic conditions that make consistent fat loss possible. But despite everything we have covered today, there is one final truth about fat loss that matters more than any technique discussed. After everything, the lipolysis, the bloodstream, the mitochondria, the energy systems, the fat-burning zone, and EPOC, it comes down to this. Fat can only be consistently lost when your body repeatedly needs more energy than it is receiving from the food you eat. That is the foundational truth. No special heart rate zone, no magic machine, no secret supplement can ever change that biological reality. While understanding the physiology helps you make smarter decisions, it does not change the basic requirement that must be met every single day. Your body must consistently draw upon its stored fat reserves day after day, week after week, and month after month without stopping. This is where most people ultimately get distracted by searching endlessly for the perfect workout or the perfect fat loss shortcut online. They obsess over finding the ideal fat-burning zone, the perfect training split, and the perfect meal timing to unlock faster results, when the real goal should be building a system they can actually maintain, enjoy, and sustain for a very long period of time. A system built around consistent movement, resistance training, cardiovascular fitness, adequate protein intake, and reasonable nutrition that fits real everyday life. The people who succeed at fat loss are not necessarily the ones who know the most fitness tricks or follow the latest trends. They are the ones who stay committed long enough and consistently enough for biology to do exactly what biology was designed to do. And once you truly understand how body fat is stored, released, transported, and finally burned inside your mitochondria, something powerful happens inside you. You stop chasing myths that promise fast results and start focusing on the small number of variables that genuinely and consistently matter. Fat loss stops being a confusing mystery full of contradictions and becomes a clear biological process you understand and can work with.
And the moment you stop guessing and start understanding, real and lasting progress stops feeling impossible and starts feeling completely inevitable for you.